Welcome, Steve Elcock, Director of Product AI. That's the important part at Zellis. Welcome to the show.
Really nice to meet you, Pete.
Yeah.
And interesting just to have this sort of impromptu session with you.
I know. I kind of put you on the spot here over lunch.
You did.
I appreciate you taking this opportunity, man. But
Love it.
yeah, you just gave me a demo of what you guys are doing with Ella and your product. And yeah, it's super impressive. I'd love to just kind of talk through this with you. But yeah, man, how's the event been for you? Is this your first one?
Superb. Yeah, I've been 2 or 3 times before.
Yeah.
Just in a different sort of scenario with different suppliers that I've been working with. So yeah, the first time, to come in this capacity as a director of product AI, it's obviously a lot's changing in this space at the moment, and there's quite a bit of interest of how AI might influence the sort of payroll world. Yeah. So no, it's been really good. Really enjoyed it.
That's great. Yeah. I feel like it's all we're talking about lately, right? There's a lot going on, but that's one thing that has got everyone's attention. I just came back from the HR Technology Conference in Vegas a few weeks ago. Obviously, it's just smattered everywhere. And you wonder how much of that is material and how much of it is a little bit vapor right now and how much of it is really actually impactful, how much is being digested. But yeah, I thought I would just talk through that with you. But what are you hearing while we're here? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about AI, it's been around, as you know, for like 70 odd years as a concept, and there's all the highs and lows. And, the great things have happened. At some point, it was a dirty word, I think, in the 70s and 80s, and suddenly everyone's talking about it. So there's a lot of hype, but there's a lot of really amazing things coming through. I think people are getting their heads around it. Obviously, ChatGPT, when that was launched, was it November 22, the biggest sort of adopted consumer app ever.
Insane.
I think it was.
In months, I think they hit 100 million users, whereas other systems, it took them years to get to 100 million.
So I think people are getting their heads around, the hype associated with that and the reality of, how they can make AI sort of help them in their day-to-day life. And what we're trying to do is keep it very grounded in real-life use cases, saying, okay, look, AI can do all this amazing high-level thought reasoning, and there's reasons for that. If you're interested, we can dig into. But I think in the payroll world, it's like there's this whole balance of, yes, it can do these great things, but how do we keep it aligned and secure and responsible? And of course, we can't go wrong with payroll. And that's perhaps a little bit different in other domains where it can be more fruity and free and do.
It's almost like a surgery. Payroll is, right? We can't get this wrong. There's no error. The margin of error is very, very slim, and the tolerance for that is very, 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 very small. And so, no, you're right. And I think a lot of that is rooted in trust, right? Payroll is a inherently risk management oriented role, and they're risk adverse group of folks, and their minds are trained on protecting the house and keeping the business out of trouble and doing the right by the employee and all that. And you can naturally see them guarding it, right? And I totally respect that. And I think if we can figure AI out in payroll, we can figure it out anywhere.
I agree. It's about one of the most sort of risk averse and important to get right areas.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
Yeah. And there are techniques as well. I think sometimes people think about it. They say, well, AI, Steve, is very probabilistic.
Yeah.
It's always going to hallucinate. And, there's some truth in that. The technology, is modeled on the human brain. And to the extent that we're probabilistic, so is AI. That's the kind of point.
And we're teaching it, which doesn't help, right? We're going to shove our bad habits in there. Don't worry. That's what I'm scared of, is we're going to push biases and incorrect things.
That's
right?
True. That's true.
We've got to protect that.
The internet is obviously full of biases, learned and all that stuff.
Sure.
But there are techniques that I think, coming through. One of them is called chain of thought reasoning. One of them is called AI as judge. You have ensemble models. So you can have these sort of separate AIs judging the results of the first one and kind of insisting on very deterministic kind of, parts of the thought pattern. So, for example, I think I just showed you, you can ask a vague question to an AI like, explain my payslip, but it can actually show you the intermediate steps it's made. Yeah. And those are things that
and the why
can
behind that. Yeah.
And that's why I think maybe the key to unlocking value in payroll is you've got that kind of reverse check the whole time running through all those AI.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's an exciting time. What do you think that people are maybe not really getting right or getting wrong or misunderstanding about AI? There's a lot going on in the media. There's a lot going on in our lives, but what do you think people are getting wrong about it?
That's a great question. I think we're all getting everything wrong at the moment because there's so much change so quickly. But, from my perspective, I guess it's, I think there's this sort of misunderstanding that if you buy an AI tool, it's a magic wand and you can just solve things.
Yeah.
Let me turn on Copilot and why can't it do this? Why can't it do that? And I think perhaps people aren't thinking deeply enough about the use cases they're trying to tackle.
Yes.
And also giving the AI, effectively the chance to get it right. You can't expect a Copilot layer or a ChatGPT layer to be able to, run over sensitive data, for example. It won't do it or it'll hallucinate. If you need it to do something like that, it has to be set up in the right way with the right guardrails, the right security model, all of that kind of stuff. So I think probably there's an education about what an AI system architecture is missing right now.
Yeah, I think there's it's like transformation. There's a lot of doing AI, air quotes, as I'll say. But is there a strategy around AI, right? And I wonder sometimes, because I think you've seen this MIT study. I'm sure we talked about that a little bit, showing something like a 95%, failure rate or whatever it is, or not getting value or ROI out of it. But if you read into that, they're not really going about it at the program kind of level, at the enterprise level, and trickling it downward. They're really just kind of piecemeal running off and doing things in a silo. And I don't think that that's really ever going to be good for anything in an enterprise.
No, it's true. I mean, I guess, you can argue
you can't operate in a vacuum.
Absolutely. And you can argue the same. Maybe it was for, when SaaS came along, everyone's like, IT directors, we must go SaaS. Let's do it. And
cloud. Remember cloud?
All these great sort of things that came along, all these great trends. And in the end, there's that sort of hype bubble. And then people kind of realize, okay, we actually don't need to do this in a staged kind of progressive, sort of well thought out, intentional way, rather than just sort of wave a magic wand.
There's a bit of an AI like fitness that needs to happen, like a getting in shape to get ready for this. I mean, what would be your recommendations to firms before they're setting out on say an AI journey or something that they're trying to accomplish with AI?
I've got all these great questions. I mean, just yesterday, I think there was a very well trending LinkedIn post by Citibank, who have forced all employees to go on prompt engineering training.
Oh, great!
Quite interesting. This is the first step, I think, in how enterprises are thinking about that intentional way of making AI deployments actually work. So, I definitely think there's internal educational programs that need to come through, not just in prompt engineering, but also in concepts like even neuroscience concepts. My background is neuroscience. One of the reasons I love this subject is it's AI is kind of an approximation of how we are as humans.
Yeah,
and
neural
in
networks,
some ways,
right?
It's the best approximation we've got. It's a pretty poor reflection even now, but it's still very good. But neural networks, and I think just there's certain concepts of a neural network that are probably quite important, like connectivity of data and associativeness of data and layers of thinking. When you process things in your brain, you kind of go through layers of thinking to higher and higher levels of abstraction features. And I think if people understood some of those concepts, they'd probably get more out of their AI rather than just expecting it to jump too far too quickly without the right way of thinking about a problem.
Yeah, and I think they got to think about it from the problem perspective. Like, what problem are you trying to solve with it, right? And I think if you start there and you have purposeful use cases that are going to tackle those issues that you have, it's a lot more. There's a lot more success to be had than just sort of saying, "Hey, we're going to blanketly throw this thing at the wall, and you just go use it and do better at your work." Right? I don't think that that's going to bring you the outcomes. At least not what I've seen. And I think you've got to be very purposeful. This stuff is expensive anyway, right? I mean, prompts aren't cheap. I mean, data. We already know about all the data costs.
I mean, what do you think about all that? In terms of sustainability, because that's a big concern. It's almost a sort of nasty little secret.
I know.
Right? So
I know. It's very expensive.
You must have that in the discussions that you have.
Yes. The inference cost. I think it was, I remember at one point I read, this was a few years ago, that I think it was something like $300,000 a month that ChatGPT was spending on, or OpenAI was spending on inferences and prompts. That's exponentially more now, I'm sure, just given the number of, and they even said that estimate was probably pretty low. So the cost of this is expensive, but the data centers, I think Sam Altman said recently, we're running out of compute power.
We definitely are.
We're running out.
Microsoft made this agreement with 3 Mile Island to buy the power from that thing to get it going again.
We're getting data farms out in the middle of the desert now and in the bottom of the ocean.
And it's going on about all these power data centers they need and stuff. So it is a nasty problem. I mean, I think, the optimist to me is looking at some of the ways in which inference costs are falling, and they definitely are.
Yeah.
DeepSeek was an interesting moment for the world.
I read that the other day. They've cut their costs significantly, or have a model that has cut the costs.
It was about 30 times cheaper than an OpenAI inference. And no one could believe it. It's, partly maybe it was Trump's embargo on NVIDIA chips. So, kind of necessity is the mother of invention for those guys. Maybe.
Workaround. The great workaround.
And they did an amazing job of putting together a chain of thought. Other things, ensemble models, things that they didn't need to light up an entire model to get the same quality of inference. So things are changing and the technology is getting better. I mean, the other thing from my perspective, I'm a little bit of an AI nerd and I try and keep ahead of where it's going next. There's things called liquid neural networks, which are even more like the brain. Because at the moment you have parameters in a neural network that kind of do this forward-backward propagation thing, but you don't really use time patterns. So if you look at a brain, you measure a brain, it's all like sort of dolphin clicks, clicking around the whole time. And there's more pattern you can hold if you have a sort of a neural network like that, rather than just kind of single interconnected vector points, which is basically what parameters are. So you can run much more sort of inference compute on a much smaller model. And that's, I think, a hopeful way forward for using less power.
But
I guess the counter argument is all the power we save will probably be sort of used up in even more sort of reliance on AI. So there is this real dilemma, I think.
Yeah, thinking about the way that you've built what you've done with Ella, and I know you showed it to me. It's really, really cool. If anybody out there hasn't seen it, you should check it out.
Sure, yeah.
Check out Zellis. But how would you explain, like in a very rudimentary, maybe very simple terms, how that works in the theme of that trust that we're talking about? That it's because listen, payroll is going to have to really feel comfortable with this, right? They're gonna have to feel comfortable about anything that they do, their team does, any system does, but definitely with AI, especially if it's going to autonomously, agentically go and behave by itself and act. How would you explain how this is constructed to create that trust?
Very good question. So the key thing is setting up the architecture in a way where there are guardrails, tools, and security just applied in the right way. So when the prompt comes in and says, please explain my pay slip, the first thing Ella, our AI, will do is say, right, well, who are you as a user?
So it's role based.
It's effectively proxying your user security as if you were using that HR system. And that's the problem with having layered AI compared to embedded AI. You really need to have AI embedded with all the authentication, authorization protocols of the software that it's interacting with. So that's kind of a really key point about security. I mean, another key point is that you would never use data to fine tune a model. You'd use all that kind of data collection that would be used to inform the final output. It can be done prior to calling the final, kind of putting it all together. So the prompt comes in, it says, who am I? Apply my security, effectively translate my request into something called structured query language. And it's incredible how AI does that. The whole point of it was made by Google to do language translation. And who'd have thought it can translate like human to code? I think Andre Kapasi recently said there's a new coding language called English. And that's very much the way I see it. It's incredible how this thing can translate English into any code, Python, SQL, whatever. So it's making into code, it's running results with that thing as if you were taking 2 or 3 weeks to read your development team. Now it's doing it in seconds. Coming back with the results, you've got your original question, the data, the kind of the thought process it's been through, and throw all of that into a big foundation model. That's how it's working. Separately, you have an AI as judge, almost running in reverse, saying, right, the answers of this thing, do they fit the original question? And am I applying the right guardrails, alignment, security? So I know there's a lot in there, but that's roughly how it works. I'm really glad to pick that apart.
No. That's cool. One of the things I think is important that I don't know if people realize is how important having good quality data is in their environment to even begin with. So if you don't have good data, but talk about that data fitness. Like, what do you think? What would be your advice to folks out here before they do enter into this?
It's such a great. I mean, I've often thought about AI sort of use cases and things like that. Very fortunate as Zellis to have very interesting, good payroll data to work with, but there's a lot of domains where the data is much more messy, much more difficult. I think anyone who's looking to achieve real value out of their AI does really need to think about how good and how much quality there is in the data that they've got. When we can't really expect AI to do well when it's got completely sort of fuzzy random data. It will do a very good job of trying to find patterns and trends in that data. But of course, the more you can clean the data, the more you can make it consistent. AI needs scaffolds to work with. And I think if you haven't given it a kind of scaffolding framework to work with.
I heard a gentleman the other day. I was listening to and I apologize, I forget his name. He is famous. And he has a marketing firm, if I'm not mistaken, is the context of his business. And they were talking about how in his organization, they're very forward with AI. They're very ahead. And they did a couple of things that I thought was really interesting that I really picked up on that I think would be very beneficial to payroll and HR. I'm going to talk about it in my panel today is he said one of the first things that we did as we were training our AI and the language models that we created, he said we went through and we first of all already had this, but we went through and scrubbed all of them. He goes, every single thing we do in our business has a standard operating procedure, and that standard operating procedure has been updated and is current at all times, right? And we maintain a folder where AI can draw on these SOPs. And he goes, think about it. He goes, you can't hire a new employee in this role, in whatever task you're asking it to do in a role, and not give it the procedures and the policies. You have to train a human. You've got to look at it in the same way. It's not a tool, it's a teammate. And you've got to think of it through that lens. You've got to put that in there. And they even went as far, because again, creating content, right? So he said they would even go as far as dossier type profiles on all of their executives and all of their team, such that the AI can then understand the personalities, the education, the tone,
that is very cool,
the backgrounds, the psychology. They even had their business personality tests in there to give the AI as much information as possible to infer off of that data set to be able to go and create content and do things. So I thought that was something I hadn't heard anyone say before. That readiness,
So I think that is, I love that, partly because operating models was something I used to do in, my former business. We used to go in and say to the HR director, here's your HR on a page, here's recruitment, personal data, payroll, absence, and you break them down, as you say, into level 1, 2, 3 processes and ultimately standard operating procedures. AI loves that stuff. Loves the structure.
It needs it. That's your scaffold you were talking about.
The scaffold, the structure. And also I think it allows you to frame use cases and value so much better as well. Ultimately, in this SOP or this job description that runs, those SOPs, these are the things we need the AI to do, which are perhaps low value, transactional, mundane things.
Right.
And then, that should augment us, the power tools for our mind, into better, more transformational roles as humans. That's I guess the hope, the optimistic hope.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, just think, and you look at payroll, right? I mean, this is a process, not even just a process. This is a practice that is just starving for innovation. And where else is there an opportunity to where being wrong is not an option, where you can be precise, and you can be precise confidently at speed and at scale, right? I think that's something that AI really, really excites me about, and the ability to automate and augment and allow people to return time to other things. I think that's so...
Returning and augmenting
What
times.
other process do you know that could benefit from that?
No, I mean, I think it is absolutely ripe for innovation, transformation.
Yeah, productivity. I mean, payroll needs time,
Of course, there's this, sort of risk sort of question about how do people become happy with things? How do they get trust? How do they start a journey? And I think there's probably certain use cases that payroll people and HR people can start with to build that trust. So you start with maybe things like simple Q&A about the payroll periods or the payroll close or the process or the policies. You can ingest that into a RAG store, and AI will do a nice job of that. And there's not so much risk in that. You're not kind of making recommendations or closing, always we need humans in the loop for that. But I think there are stages on the journey. Start with simple Q&A, look at policy ingestion, maybe open that up for internal sort of administrators and managers and employees, perhaps in that order, depends on where the value is to be found, before you then go into the sort of deep stuff about data that we were talking about earlier. And that does need a lot more thought about, the security models, the AI as judge.
What problems you're solving. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I guess one last thing to say on that is that if you had the opportunity of, someone who was checking your work 24/7, who didn't get tired, this incredible graduate you applied, he didn't need to sleep, you'd probably say, yeah, I'll take that. And it's a good way of thinking about AI. If you get bogged down in the risk side, it's like, why wouldn't I just have something just checking the work all the time and training it to do things almost adversarially to kind of check that we're not making mistakes. I think that's a great use case in payroll as well.
Agreed. And what payroll team couldn't use the extra hands, the extra minds in this case. But, the thing that I think is important for people to understand too is, the reality of payroll getting an AI investment specifically for payroll is probably unlikely, right? The business is not starting out, unless payroll is their business, which then they're probably a vendor. They're probably not starting. Not the one that I've not come across one yet where they're starting in payroll and going, hey, we're gonna use AI to transform payroll. No, they're more doing it on their business with the customer, with the product, with the whatever, and then that's trickling down after the learnings happen over to payroll. So in large part, I think payroll is going to get their AI from vendors like Zellis, like the other your peers, and I think that's really. I actually think that's better. Because I think that payroll is your product and it is your business. So you are thinking about that very differently than a business who might be applying it secondarily to a back office, to what they see as just a back office process. But what are your thoughts on that?
I mean,
how do you feel about that? I'm sure there's enterprises out there who will make investments into, and I have seen them. There are a few, but they're the biggest ones. And that's because they have a wholesale scalable program going on in other areas where they can, easily turn this on in other places. But that's not probably going to be everybody, right? They're probably going to get it from a commercial product.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a couple of really interesting things in what you said there. Business case, we'll just come back to you, but I agree with you on domain specific knowledge. I think so many people I see who, they chat with ChatGPT on some complex problem and think, I'm now an expert because ChatGPT told me this stuff. And it's not the case. You do need domain experts to scrutinize, to really get to that kind of deep connected understanding
know whether it's right or not.
Domain. So, there's no doubt that's true. And customers should be looking for their vendors to give them that deep domain knowledge and also assure them about all the thought processes, and not just that they have in their business and their culture, but actually how they've trained their AI with all those same ways of working. So I totally agree with that. I think in terms of business case, it's almost like AI is a tool for change, not so much in the old days you bring in Deloitte and Accenture and big companies to come in and sort of say, well, how can we transform our business? Probably those thought processes are still the same. It's just the tools of how we're going to do it are different. So perhaps instead of offshoring or instead of technology transformation, instead of something like that, it's okay, AI can actually do some of this mundane stuff, and that's how you drive the business case. So picking out through that method you described earlier, a very rigorous breakdown into SOPs or something like that. Right, there's this much cost, this much transaction going through these things. This is where AI can help us, and therefore level us up to do.
What are your thoughts on what it's going to do to traditional SaaS software? I mean, I think you could see, you probably saw recently Workday, right? And Sana is going to become the UI, the UX, right? Very conversational, very AI driven. I mean, I think there will be a point where we're going to just talk and say, and we won't even know that it's Workday or Zellis or whatever under the hood. We're just going to say, hey, I want to take a day off. Hey, I need to know how many people I have in whatever department, whatever the use case is. But what are your thoughts on what it's going to do to software? I think it's becoming software, really.
It's probably going to be one of the most disrupted areas of industry, in the short term. I mean, with products like Cursor, Windsurf, we're using Codex with OpenAI. Again, you just code in English, things that used to take me, hours, maybe days to do.
Right.
Just now you can do in seconds, really. You can go through 15 minutes and I'll have a pull request made that previously would have just taken ages. And the AI has got the gist of it. It's looked at the code base, it's worked it out, it's translated my instructions. So I think SaaS is going to be highly disrupted. Your point about UI, UX, I think is really interesting. I think that's where things are going to change really quickly in the next few years. It reminds me of that film Minority Report, where people are sort of dragging things on the screen. Or actually the UI, there's this phrase, AI could replace UI, and I kind of agree with that. What I mean is the AI sort of generates a UI that's very personalized for you, for your problem, your use case, and probably all it needs is back-end sort of API calls to what's called MCP, Model Context Protocol, which is the way of like interacting with enterprise or databases. Ultimately.
The agents are the software now.
That whole UI layer is going to be also generated through
It's
AI,
exciting though. I love that.
It's going to be mad.
I love that
and avatars as well.
How often have you gone into a solution and you're like, I don't know where to go to get this, or I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't have anyone to really ask.
I'm fascinated by avatars because you could explore interactions that you couldn't perhaps normally explore. So in a sales team,
it makes it more human that way too.
I want to explore, interacting with this really tough sales guy or this really nice,
role play,
and actually exploring kind of behavioral stuff and helping us as humans develop.
VR, even that, all that AR, VR, XR, all of it is, all the virtual reality type stuff is what I'm referring to. Augmented reality, spatial reality, all of that I think is going to be massive for imagine teaching a surgeon or teaching someone to do a job. How about just trying out a job and being like, hey, this isn't for me.
That's also
this isn't the place for me. This isn't the type of work I want to do. I think it would be wonderful for university kids and for anyone to be able to explore something and be able to test it out in a real, and it's augmented, but it's real. It feels real. At least it's sensually, I guess you could say. But that gives you the opportunity to experiment and explore and create. Right. And I think that's what's one of the exciting things about AI is our opportunity to have more time to create. And we can be the emotional, emotionally intelligent folks that we are. But man. So what's next for you guys? How are you guys thinking about what you're building next?
So, I mean, gosh, there's a lot to do. We've got this Ella product going really well over HR payroll data. We need to, get deployment going through our customer base, which is going to be very exciting. Get feedback. We are looking at avatar interaction, which is a bit scary, but also quite interesting. We're struggling a bit with the speed of responses over the third parties that currently provide it, and they're catching up quickly, but that will change. I mean, I'm personally, for myself, it's almost taking me full circle back to my roots. My roots are neuroscience.
Yes.
And I'm very interested in exploring where AI is heading to be even more like the brain. And that's why I like this liquid neural network idea. And there's loads to sort of think about with that as well. I like to ask a question. Have you ever thought about how you think? We don't stop to think about how we think.
Right? Yeah.
And I think AI,
and we all do think different. We come to different answers.
It's almost philosophy, some of this stuff, like the layered thinking and the fact that we are very probabilistic as humans. That's what AI is too. Some of that I'd like to explore more. I don't know quite how to sort of get it into products or monetize it yet, but it's interesting.
I like that. I heard a leader say the other day, that they kick off a lot of their speeches with having people draw a star on a paper. And they pointed out that when you do that, you find, they ask, how did you go about it? And some people start at the top and some people start, in the middle, and some people just make it all one line. But it's the same answer. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think there's something there around, like, we all have different ways of thinking about things.
We're all a little bit mad, Oliver Sacks.
And it would be cool to be able to capture some of that and be able to have that creativity in there. So I love that. I love that thought process.
And then you've got Elon Musk with his Neuralink as well. Maybe that's going to go
Neuralink,
well.
We'll be commanding things with our brains.
7 people now. Well, I think it might be more. Like 7 people.
They do have 7
these
people
implants,
with it.
and they're now controlling mouse movement and stuff like that, literally through direct brain implants.
Now, were these folks that were maybe had something impairment?
Paraplegic, difficult. Very
good for them.
Problematic.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So it's genuinely inspiring to hear the stories of that.
It is.
It's quite.
And the sky's the limit. Like this is one of the things that I'd love your thoughts on this. Like I always tell people, I'm like, look, this is our time in HR and payroll or any division and industry. This is our moment to hit reset and make things the way we want to have it, or the way it should be is a better way to say it, right? I mean, there's so many things that we live with because the systems that we have can only do it that way. But now we can reinvent, we can reimagine our processes and the experience, for everybody.
So it's an exciting time to be alive,
incredible.
I think. So really great to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you taking the time. All the best to you guys. And I'd love to stay close and see an update and check out what you guys are doing further. Yeah, it's exciting, man. Exciting times. Appreciate you.
Not at all. Real pleasure. Thanks, Pete.